It was just another Thursday evening at Riverside Gas and Go when three leather-clad bikers rolled in, their choppers rumbling like distant thunder. The station attendant, 19-year-old Kayla Wilson, felt a knot form in her stomach as she watched them through the glass. But it wasn't the bikers who would remember this night with regret. It was the quiet, gray-haired man filling up his pickup truck at pump number 4. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Former Marine Corps Master Sergeant James "Iron" Calloway had spent 22 years serving his country in some of the world's most dangerous places. After 4 combat tours and a Silver Star for valor, he'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. Now, all he wanted was to get home to his grandson's birthday party with the ice cream cake slowly melting in his cooler. But when the leader of the biker gang decided to harass the elderly woman at Pump 7, Calloway made a choice that would change all their lives forever. This is a story about respect, consequences, and why you should never judge a book by its cover, especially when that cover happens to be a faded USMC cap and a weathered pair of boots. The setting sun cast long shadows across the Riverside Gas and Go station just off Route 16 in Millfield, Ohio. The small town had seen better days, with the closure of the textile mill 10 years ago, leaving many locals struggling to make ends meet. But it was home to James Calloway. And after a lifetime of moving from base to base, home meant everything. At 63, Calloway's body bore the marks of his service. A slight limp from shrapnel in Fallujah, a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw from a helicopter crash in Afghanistan, and hands that sometimes trembled when he was tired. Today had been long, driving 2 hours to the specialty bakery in Columbus that made his grandson Tyler's favorite ice cream cake. The boy was turning 8 tomorrow, and nothing would stop Calloway from making it special. The former Marine Master Sergeant pulled his 2012 Ford F-150 into the gas station, noticing he was running dangerously low on fuel. The truck had seen better days, much like its owner, but it was reliable and paid for. Calloway checked his watch, 6:47 p.m. He'd make it home by 7:30 if traffic was light, plenty of time before Tyler's bedtime. Inside the station's mini-mart, 19-year-old Kayla Wilson was counting the minutes until her shift ended at 8 p.m. A nursing student at the community college, she worked evenings to help pay tuition. The gas station was usually quiet, just locals filling up and grabbing essentials. "Evening, Miss Kayla." Calloway nodded as he walked in to prepay for his gas. "Hi, Mr. Calloway," she replied with a genuine smile. Everyone in town knew and respected the retired Marine. He volunteered at the high school's JROTC program and ran a small support group for local veterans. "Getting ready for Tyler's big day?" "Yes, ma'am." "Got his cake right here." He patted the cooler he was carrying. 40 on pump 4, please." As Calloway paid, the rumble of motorcycles grew louder outside. 3 Harley-Davidsons pulled in, their riders clad in leather vests bearing the insignia of the Warlords, a motorcycle club from about 50 miles north in Canton. They weren't one of the notorious outlaw clubs, but they had a reputation for trouble when they traveled as a pack. Kayla's smile faltered slightly. The lead rider, a burly man with a thick beard and arms covered in tattoos, cut his engine and dismounted. The patch on his vest read, "Crusher." Brendan Crusher Miller, 38, with a rap sheet that included assault and possession. Behind him were 2 other men, a lanky rider who went by Snake, real name Eric Peterson, 35, and a muscular man with a shaved head known as Brick, Curtis Fleming, 40. Calloway noticed the change in Kayla's demeanor. "Everything. All right?" "Yeah," she said quickly. "Just, those guys came through last month and were pretty rowdy. My manager had to ask them to leave." Calloway nodded, taking his receipt. "I'll be quick then." Outside, he began pumping gas into his truck, keeping one eye on the bikers. They seemed more interested in each other than causing trouble, laughing and sharing a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs prominently displayed around the pumps. At Pump 7, an elderly woman was struggling with the gas cap of her Buick. Martha Davidson, 75, widow of a Korean War veteran, was returning from visiting her sister in the nursing home. Her arthritic hands couldn't quite get the leverage needed to unscrew the cap. Calloway was about to walk over and offer assistance when Crusher and his friends noticed her too. "Hey, Grandma!" Crusher called out, his voice carrying across the station. "You need a strong man to help with that?" Martha looked up, startled, her gray hair blowing slightly in the evening breeze. She clutched her cardigan closer, clearly uncomfortable. "With the attention?" "No, thank you," she said politely but firmly. "I can manage." Crusher laughed, elbowing Snake. "Hear that? The old lady doesn't need our help." Snake grinned, showing a gold tooth. "Maybe she thinks we're trying to rob her." "You hiding your millions in that Buick, Grandma?" Calloway finished pumping his gas, replaced the nozzle, and screwed his gas cap back on. He should get home. The cake was melting. Tyler was waiting. This wasn't his business, but Martha Davidson was now visibly trembling as Crusher approached. Her, standing too close, invading her personal space. "I said I'm fine," Martha repeated, her voice less steady now. "Come on, just trying to be nice," Crusher insisted, reaching for the gas cap. "See? Like this." He gave it a hard twist, making Martha wince. Calloway had seen enough. 22 years in the Corps had taught him when a situation was about to escalate. He set his cooler in the truck and walked over, his stride purposeful despite the limp. "The lady said she's fine," Calloway said, his voice calm but carrying, the unmistakable tone of authority that had commanded men in battle. Crusher turned, sizing up the older man. Calloway wasn't particularly tall at 5'10", but decades of military discipline kept his frame solid. He wore jeans, work boots, and a simple blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms coated with muscle and a USMC tattoo. His gray hair was cut short, and his face, weathered by years in harsh climates, remained impassive. "Well, look what we got here," Crusher smirked. "Captain America coming to save the day. Master Sergeant, actually," Calloway corrected without emotion. "And the lady doesn't need saving. She just needs respect." The other two bikers had moved closer now, forming a loose semicircle. Inside the mini-mart, Kayla was on the phone, her expression worried. "Respect?" Crusher laughed. "I was being respectful. Right, boys?" Snake and Brick nodded, but their eyes were calculating. Snake's hand slipped to his back pocket where he kept a switchblade, a fact not lost on Calloway. Martha took the opportunity to shuffle back toward her car door. "Please, I don't want any trouble," she said. "No trouble at all, ma'am," Calloway assured her, never taking his eyes off Crusher. "Why don't you go inside and pay? I'm sure these gentlemen were just leaving." Crusher's face darkened. "We don't take orders from senior citizens, old man. Maybe you didn't notice, but there's 3 of us and 1 of you." "I noticed," Calloway replied, his voice level. "Hardly seems fair for you boys." That got a laugh from Brick, which earned him a sharp look from Crusher. "You got a big mouth for someone about to get their ass kicked," Crusher growled, stepping closer until he was inches from Calloway's face. His breath reeked of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. Calloway didn't flinch. "Son, I've been shot at by experts. You're going to have to do better than bad breath and empty threats." Crusher's face flushed red with anger. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way, especially not in front of his crew. His massive hand shot out, grabbing the front of Calloway's shirt. "Let's see how tough you are now, old—" He never finished the sentence. With movements honed from thousands of hours of training, Calloway's left hand clamped down on Crusher's wrist, applying precise pressure to the radial nerve. Simultaneously, his right hand delivered a short, powerful strike to Crusher's solar plexus. Not hard enough to cause serious damage, but enough to make the bigger man gasp and double over. The entire movement took less than 2 seconds. Crusher stumbled backward, clutching his stomach and wheezing. Snake. And Brick stared in disbelief. Then Snake pulled the switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with practiced ease. "Big mistake, Grandpa," Snake hissed, advancing with the blade held low. Calloway shifted his stance slightly, centering his weight. "That would be your second mistake of the evening. Your first thought was that a knife gives you an advantage." Snake lunged forward, slashing the knife in a horizontal arc aimed at Calloway's midsection. The veteran sidestepped with surprising agility, grabbed Snake's extended wrist, and twisted. The knife clattered to the pavement as Snake howled in pain, dropping to one knee as Calloway maintained the wrist lock. Brick, seeing his friends taken down so easily, hesitated only briefly before charging forward like a linebacker. Calloway released Snake, pivoted smoothly, and used Brick's momentum against him, redirecting the charge with a subtle shift and extended foot. Brick's own speed sent him crashing into a stack of windshield washer fluid containers displayed outside, the mini-mart. The entire confrontation had taken less than 30 seconds. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Crusher was struggling to his feet, rage contorting his features. "You're dead! You hear me? Dead!" Inside the mini-mart, Kayla was frantically speaking into the phone, while Martha Davidson sat on a chair by the coffee station, her hands shaking as she sipped water from a paper cup. The rumble of an engine cut through the tension as Sheriff Daniel Malone's patrol car pulled into the station, lights flashing. The 50-year-old sheriff stepped out, hand resting casually on his holster, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice deceptively mild. "Someone wants to tell me what's going on here?" Crusher pointed at Calloway. "This crazy old man attacked us for no reason. We were just getting gas." Sheriff Malone looked at Calloway, who stood calmly by Martha's Buick. "That's how it happened, James?" "Not exactly, Dan," Calloway replied. "These gentlemen were harassing Mrs. Davidson. I suggested they stop. They took exception to that suggestion." The sheriff nodded, then looked at the security cameras mounted on the station's overhang. "Well, I'm sure the cameras caught the whole thing. Why don't we all go inside and take a look at the footage? I'd hate to have to take anyone in based on conflicting stories." Crusher's confidence faltered. "We don't have time for this. We were just leaving anyway." "I'm afraid I'm going to need statements from all of you," Sheriff Malone insisted. "Won't take but a few minutes if everyone cooperates." Inside the mini-mart, Kayla had already queued up the security footage on the store's computer system. The sheriff watched it with Crusher, Snake, and Brick standing uncomfortably behind him. The video clearly showed them harassing Martha, Calloway, intervening peacefully, and Crusher initiating the physical confrontation. "Well now," the sheriff said, turning to face the bikers. "Looks to me like you boys have a choice. You can give me your information for my report and be on your way with a warning, or I can take you in for assault, harassment, and—" He glanced at the knife still lying on the pavement outside, carrying a concealed weapon. "What'll it be?" Crusher glared at Calloway, who stood quietly by the door, but even he knew when he was beaten. "Fine. We'll give our information." As the bikers sullenly provided their details to the sheriff, Martha approached Calloway. "Thank you," she said quietly. "My Herbert, my late husband, he would have done the same. He was in Korea, you know." Calloway nodded respectfully. "I know, ma'am. I met Mr. Davidson at the VFW before he passed. He was a good man." Martha seemed surprised, then smiled sadly. "Yes, he was. Are you hurt at all?" "No, ma'am. Just sorry your evening was disrupted." "Well, thank goodness you were here," she patted his arm. "Those men, I was so frightened." Calloway checked his watch, 7:15 p.m. The ice cream cake would be starting to melt by now. Sheriff Malone will make sure you get home safe, Mrs. Davidson. If you'll excuse me, I have a birthday cake to deliver." As he headed for the door, Sheriff Malone caught his eye and gave him a subtle nod of appreciation. They'd served together, briefly in Desert Storm before Malone had come home to join the sheriff's department. Crusher, however, wasn't finished. As Calloway passed by, he muttered under his breath, "This isn't over, old man. Nobody makes a fool of me." Calloway paused, meeting the biker's gaze directly. "Son, I didn't make a fool of you. You did that all by yourself." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping so only Crusher could hear. "And if you're thinking of finding me later, remember this. What you saw tonight? That was me being polite." The look in Calloway's eyes made Crusher step back involuntarily. There was something there, a glimpse of the man who had faced death in faraway places and come back changed by it. Outside, Calloway retrieved the cooler from his truck and checked the cake. It was still mostly frozen, though beginning to soften, around the edges. Tyler would never know the difference. As he started the engine, he caught sight of his reflection in the rearview mirror. A weariness had settled in his eyes, one that had nothing to do with physical exertion. He'd left the violence behind years ago, or so he thought. As he pulled out of the Riverside Gas and Go, Calloway couldn't shake the feeling that Crusher's threat wasn't idle. The man had been humiliated in front of his friends, and men like that didn't forgive easily, but that was a problem for another day. Tonight there was a birthday to celebrate, and his grandson was waiting. Tyler Calloway's 8th birthday party went exactly as planned. The dinosaur-themed cake was a hit, even if the edges were a bit softer than intended. James watched with quiet satisfaction as his grandson blew out the candles, surrounded by friends, from school and neighborhood kids. His daughter, Emily Williams, caught his eye from across the room and mouthed a silent, "Thank you." At 34, Emily was Calloway's only child, born during his second marriage, which had ended amicably when Emily was 12. She'd married her high school sweetheart, Mark Williams, who now worked as an electrician for the county. They were good people, working hard to give Tyler and his 4-year-old sister Abby the stable home that military life had never quite afforded Emily. "Dad, you okay?" Emily asked, finding a moment to slip away from the chaos of 8-year-olds. Hopped up on sugar. "You seem distracted." Calloway smiled, pushing thoughts of the gas station confrontation from his mind. "Just tired from the drive. Getting old, I guess." Emily frowned, not buying it. She had her mother's intuition and his stubborn persistence. "You're not that old, and you're never just tired." What happened? He considered brushing it off, but knew better. Had a little situation at the gas station on the way back. Nothing serious. What kind of situation requires this? She reached out, touching a small bruise forming on his forearm, where he'd blocked one of Crusher's wild swings. Calloway sighed. "Some bikers are giving an elderly woman trouble." I stepped in. Emily's expression shifted between concern and exasperation. "Dad, you can't keep—" "It's handled," he interrupted gently. "Sheriff Malone was there. Everything's fine." She studied him for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Just be careful, okay? The kids need their grandpa in one piece." The party wound down around 9 p.m. as tired parents collected equally exhausted children. Tyler, fighting sleep but losing, hugged his grandfather tightly before being carried to bed. "Thanks for the awesome cake, Grandpa," he mumbled. "And the model airplane kit. Will you help me build it tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it for the world, buddy," Calloway promised, ruffling the boy's hair. "Or 900 hours sharp." "That's 9 a.m. in regular people time," Tyler said with a sleepy grin, their familiar joke. After helping with the cleanup, Calloway declined Emily's offer to stay the night and drove the 15 minutes to his small ranch house, on the outskirts of town. The modest home sat on 2 acres bordered by pine trees, offering privacy without isolation. A workshop behind the house held his woodworking tools, where he crafted furniture and toys for the grandkids. The night air was cool as he stepped onto his porch. Something felt off. 22 years in hostile environments had given Calloway a sixth sense for danger, and it was humming now. He paused, keys in hand, and surveyed his property. Nothing seemed disturbed. No unfamiliar vehicles on the road, no footprints in the carefully raked gravel driveway. Still, the feeling persisted. Inside, Calloway completed his nightly routine with military precision, securing doors and windows, checking his home defense shotgun, loaded but safely secured, setting coffee for the morning. The routine was comforting, a constant in a life that had seen too much change and chaos. He considered calling Sheriff Malone to ask if the bikers had left town, but decided against it. No need to seem paranoid. Besides, men like Crusher typically made loud threats, but rarely followed through once the heat of the moment passed. Sleep came fitfully that night, punctuated by dreams of distant battles mixed with images of Crusher's face, contorted in rage. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the bedroom blinds. Calloway rose at 5:30 a.m., same as he had every day since boot camp in 1979. Physical training was modified these days, gentle stretching for the old injuries, a 3-mile walk instead of a 5-mile run, but the discipline remained. By 8:45 a.m., he was pulling into Emily's driveway, a cardboard box containing the materials to properly mount and display Tyler's new model airplane once they finished building it. The neighborhood was quiet on this Friday morning, most adults at work, and children at school. Tyler had the day off for a teacher workday, which made the timing of his birthday perfect. Emily greeted him at the door, coffee mug in hand. "He's been up since 6, waiting for you," she said with mock exasperation. "I told him you'd be here. At 9, not 6. "The boy has good military instincts," Calloway replied with a wink. "Early is on time is late." Tyler appeared behind his mother, already dressed and vibrating with excitement. "Grandpa, I got everything ready on the dining table. Mom said we could use it as long as we put the newspaper down." The morning passed pleasantly, grandfather and grandson working side by side assembling the P-51 Mustang model. Calloway shared stories about the real planes he'd seen during his service, carefully edited for 8-year-old ears. "Did you ever fly in one, Grandpa?" Tyler asked, carefully applying glue to a wing section. "Not a P-51, no. They stopped using those long before my time, but I've been in plenty of helicopters and a few cargo planes." "Were you scared?" Calloway considered the question seriously. Sometimes, being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do what needs doing even when you are scared. Tyler nodded solemnly, absorbing this wisdom. "Like when you helped that lady at the gas station?" Calloway's head snapped up. "How did you know about that?" "I heard Mom telling Dad last night. She said you got in a fight with some bad guys." Tyler's eyes were wide with admiration. "Were you scared then?" "Your mom shouldn't have," Calloway began, then stopped himself. "Yes, I was a little scared. Anytime there's a chance someone might get hurt, a sensible person feels scared. But you helped anyway." "Yes?" "That's what heroes do," Tyler declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. Calloway felt a tightness in his chest. "I'm no hero, buddy. I just try to do what's right." The model was nearly complete when Emily announced lunch was ready. After sandwiches and fruit, Calloway excused himself to head home. He had a standing appointment with his veterans support group at the community center at 3 p.m. "See you Sunday for dinner?" Emily asked as she walked him to the door. "Wouldn't miss it," he promised, giving her a one-armed hug. The drive home was uneventful, but as Calloway turned onto his gravel drive, the feeling of wrongness returned stronger than before. This time the source was obvious. His front door stood slightly ajar. Calloway parked and approached cautiously. He hadn't left it that way. He never left it that way. 20 yards from the porch, he stopped and listened. No sounds from inside. No unfamiliar vehicles in sight. He considered calling the sheriff but decided against it. If someone was inside, they'd be gone before help arrived. And if they were still there, well, they'd picked the wrong house to rob. Moving silently for a man his age, Calloway circled to the back of the house. The rear door was intact, still locked. The workshop appeared undisturbed. Returning to the front, he climbed the porch steps, avoiding the one that creaked. The interior of the house was dim after the bright sunlight outside. Calloway paused in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust and scanning for movement. Nothing. He stepped inside, keeping his back to the wall. The living room had been ransacked. Couch cushions slashed open, bookshelves emptied, his military shadow, box broken on the floor, metals scattered. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. The kitchen was similarly destroyed. Drawers pulled out and emptied, refrigerator contents thrown across the floor, cabinet doors hanging from broken hinges. His bedroom had received the same treatment, with an additional touch. Across the wall above his bed, someone had spray-painted "Round 2 coming soon." Calloway felt a cold calm settle over him, the same detachment that had served him well in combat zones. He took out his phone and called Sheriff Malone. "Dan, it's James Calloway. Someone broke into my house while I was out. You might want to come take a look." 20 minutes later, Malone's patrol car pulled up alongside a crime scene unit. The sheriff took one look at the destruction and the spray-painted message and let out a low whistle. "Those bikers from yesterday?" Calloway nodded. "Seems likely." Malone walked through the house, careful not to disturb potential evidence. "They did a number on the place. Anything valuable missing?" "Hadn't checked yet, but I don't think this was about theft." The sheriff nodded grimly. "A message. Well, they've graduated from harassment to breaking and entering, vandalism, and criminal threatening. That's enough to bring them in." "If you can find them," Calloway pointed out. "Oh, I'll find them," Malone assured him. "Idiots like that aren't exactly master criminals. They probably used credit cards somewhere in town. We'll check the motels first." While the crime scene technicians dusted for prints and took photographs, Calloway sat on his porch, fighting the rising tide of anger. He'd seen what anger and a thirst for vengeance could do to good men in war zones. He wouldn't let it happen to him here, in the peace he'd fought so hard to protect. Sheriff Malone joined him after giving instructions to his team. "We'll have someone patrol your street regularly for the next few days. In the meantime, maybe stay with your daughter." Calloway shook his head. "And risk leading them to my family? No. I'll be fine here." "James." "I'll be fine, Dan. This isn't my first rodeo." The sheriff sighed, knowing better than to argue. "At least let me leave Deputy Reynolds here tonight. He can sit in his car out front." "One night," Calloway conceded. "Just until you find these guys." By evening, the crime scene unit had finished their work. They'd found several fingerprints that didn't match Calloway's, along with boot prints in the flower bed beneath the bedroom window where the intruders had likely entered. Sheriff Malone promised to run them through the system immediately. Calloway spent the remainder of the day cleaning up the mess. Some things could be repaired or replaced, but others, like the handcrafted chest his father had made him upon his enlistment, now split down the middle, were irreplaceable. The Veterans Support Group would have to manage without him today. He called Ryan Spencer, a former Army Ranger who co-facilitated the group, to explain the situation. "Need backup?" Ryan asked immediately. At 35, he was younger than most in their group, having served in Afghanistan and Iraq before losing his left leg below the knee to an IED in 2010. "Not necessary," Calloway assured him. "Sheriff's handling it." "With all due respect, sir, sheriff departments aren't exactly known for their response times. Say the word, and I can have 4 guys at your place within the hour." The offer was tempting. Calloway knew Ryan's 4 guys would be fellow veterans, men who understood the brotherhood of service and wouldn't hesitate to stand guard. But escalation wasn't the answer. "I appreciate it, Ryan, but let's let the law handle this for now." "Roger that, but keep your phone handy." After hanging up, Calloway went to his bedroom and opened the closet. Behind winter jackets and rarely worn suits was a small safe. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was his service pistol, a Beretta M9. He hadn't fired it in years, keeping it secured out of respect for Emily's wishes about firearms. But tonight, it would stay within reach. Deputy Mark Reynolds arrived at 8 p.m., parking his patrol car in Calloway's driveway with a clear view of both the house and the road. The young deputy, barely 30, seemed eager to prove himself. "Sheriff, says I'm to stay put until morning, sir. Don't worry about bringing me anything. Got my thermos and sandwiches." "Appreciate it, son," Calloway said. "I'll bring you some real coffee in a couple hours. That department will kill you faster than any criminal." Reynolds laughed. "Never turn down good coffee, sir." Night fell, and with it came a steady rain that drummed on the roof and streaked the windows. Calloway sat in his repaired living room, listening to the weather and the occasional crackle of the deputy's radio outside. Around 11 p.m., he brought Reynolds the promised coffee and a slice of Emily's homemade apple pie that he'd salvaged from the ransacked refrigerator. "Any word from the sheriff?" he asked as the deputy gratefully accepted the offerings. Reynolds nodded, swallowing a bite of pie. "He called about an hour ago. They found 3 motorcycles registered to guys with the same names at the River View motel, but no sign of the men themselves. Left their stuff behind, though, so they're probably coming back. Or they got spooked and ran," Calloway suggested. "Maybe." Reynolds didn't sound convinced. "Sheriff's got plainclothes watching the motel just in case." Calloway returned to the house, double-checking locks and windows before settling into his recliner with a book. Sleep would be elusive tonight, but he didn't mind. The rain continued its gentle percussion, almost lulling him into a doze despite his intentions to remain alert. The sound that snapped him fully awake wasn't loud, just the soft scrape of something against the side of the house. It could have been a branch in the wind, except there were no trees close enough to the walls. Calloway set his book aside and reached for the Beretta, moving silently to the window. The view of the driveway showed Reynolds's patrol car, the deputy's silhouette visible through the rain-streaked windshield. Nothing seemed amiss there. The noise came again, from the direction of the workshop behind the house. Calloway considered alerting Reynolds, but hesitated. It could be nothing, a raccoon or a possum seeking shelter from the rain. No need to drag the young deputy out into the downpour for wildlife. Slipping on a rain jacket, Calloway moved to the back door. The Beretta was a comforting weight in his right hand, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. He flicked on the porch light and scanned the yard. Rain fell in silvery sheets, obscuring visibility beyond 20 yards. The workshop's door appeared closed, just as he'd left it. But as lightning briefly illuminated the scene, Calloway caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting behind the pie building, definitely not wildlife. He raised the Beretta, thumbing off the safety. "Sheriff's deputy out front," he called into the darkness. "This property is under surveillance. Show yourself now." Silence greeted his command, broken only by the steady drumming of rain. Calloway held his position, eyes trained on the spot where he'd seen movement. 5 seconds passed. 10, 15. Then, from behind the workshop emerged a figure, short, slight, drenched to the skin. "Not one of the bikers." "Don't shoot," called a tremulous voice. "Please, I need help." "Step into the light," Calloway commanded, Beretta still raised but finger resting outside the trigger guard. The figure shuffled forward, hands held high. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the face of a young woman, no more than 25. Her dark hair was plastered to her head, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. A nasty bruise was forming on her left cheekbone. "My name's Tessa," she said, voice barely audible above the rain. "Tessa Reeves. I was with them, the bikers, but I didn't know what they were planning, I swear." Calloway lowered the pistol slightly but remained cautious. "How did you find my house?" "Crusher, Brendan. He had your address. Found it online or something? She shivered violently. When they came back to the motel and said what they'd done to your place, I told them it was wrong. Brendan got mad, said I was a traitor. He hit me. Her hand touched the bruise gingerly. And you came here because they're coming for you tonight, she blurted out. All 3 of them, plus 2 more guys they called in from Canton. They've been drinking, taking pills. They're armed. Calloway's mind raced. If she was telling the truth, he needed to alert Reynolds immediately. If she was lying, this could be a distraction while the others approached from another direction. There's a deputy out front, he said, watching her reaction carefully. Relief flooded her features. Good. Call for backup. There's 5 of them. Now, and they're not planning on leaving witnesses. Decision made, Calloway lowered the Beretta completely and jerked his head toward the back door. Inside, quickly. Once in the kitchen, he handed her a dish towel for her face and picked up his phone to call Reynolds. Deputy, this is Calloway. I need you to call for backup immediately. I have information that suggests multiple armed suspects are on their way here. He listened briefly. No, the source is credible. A young woman who was with them. She's inside. With me now. Reynolds' voice came through clearly despite the rain. Copy that, sir. Calling it in now. Sheriff Malone actually has units nearby at the motel. ETA should be less than 5 minutes. Good. Stay in your vehicle, stay alert. I'll secure the house. Calloway ended the call and turned his attention back to Tessa, who had sunk into a kitchen chair, still shivering. How did you get here? He asked, opening a cabinet to retrieve a first aid kit. I stole Crusher's truck keys after he passed out, drove as close as I dared, then walked the last half-mile through the woods. She accepted the ice pack he offered for her cheek. They were planning to come around midnight, figured everyone would be asleep by then. Calloway glanced at the clock. 11:42 p.m. Not much time. How well do you know these men? She looked down. I've been with Crusher for about 6 months. Met him at a bar in Canton where I was waitressing. He seemed exciting at first. Older guy, motorcycle, that whole bad boy thing. She gave a bitter laugh. Turns out the bad part wasn't an act. And the others? Snake and Brick have been with him forever. The other 2 are cousins of Brick's, Vince and Tony Fleming, ex-cons, both of them. Mean drunks. Calloway moved, efficiently around the kitchen, closing blinds and checking locks while maintaining conversation. What changed your mind about them? About Crusher? Tessa touched her bruised face. This isn't the first time he's hit me, but it's the first time I've seen them planning something this calculated. They were talking about teaching the old man a lesson he won't survive. I realized they weren't just angry drunks anymore. They were planning murder. Outside, the wail of approaching sirens cut through the rain. Reynolds' voice crackled over a bullhorn. This is the sheriff's department. The property is surrounded. James Calloway, please flash your porch lights if you're safe. Calloway moved to the switch and flicked it 3 times in quick succession. Moments later, a heavy knock came at the front door. Mr. Calloway, it's Deputy Reynolds. Calloway opened the door, Beretta still in hand but pointed down. Reynolds stood on the porch alongside Sheriff Malone, both drenched but alert. James, Malone nodded, stepping inside. Got your message from Reynolds. Where's the girl? Kitchen, Calloway replied, leading the way. Tessa looked up as they entered, shrinking back slightly at the sight of the uniformed men. Malone approached, her gently, hands visible. Ms. Reeves, I'm Sheriff Daniel Malone. I understand you have information about a planned attack on this property. She nodded, then spent the next 5 minutes detailing what she knew. How Crusher had become obsessed with revenge after being humiliated at the gas station, how they'd broken into Calloway's house earlier as a warning, and how they'd recruited additional help for tonight's planned assault. They have guns? Malone asked, his expression grave. At least 3 that I saw. Crusher has a revolver, Vince brought a shotgun, and I think Snake has some kind of small pistol. The sheriff exchanged looks with Calloway. We need to get you both out of here. I'm not leaving my home, Calloway stated firmly. This isn't a negotiation, James. If they show up and find a dozen deputies waiting, that's one thing. But I'm not risking civilian lives. I served 22 years, Dan. I'm hardly a civilian. In the eyes of the law, you are, Malone countered. And I'm not having a firefight in my county if I can avoid it. Calloway was about to argue further when headlights swept across the front yard, visible through a gap in the blinds. A vehicle was pulling up, not with the caution of someone planning an ambush, but with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Expecting company? Malone asked, hand moving to his sidearm. Before Calloway could answer, the distinctive sound of a diesel engine shutting down was followed by car doors opening and closing. Multiple sets of footsteps approached the porch, then a confident knock. Calloway, it's Ryan Spencer. I brought reinforcements. Malone raised an eyebrow. Friends of yours? Veterans from my support group, Calloway explained. I told them not to come. Clearly they don't follow orders well, the sheriff remarked dryly. Calloway opened the front door to find Ryan Spencer on his porch, accompanied by 3 other men. Ryan, with his prosthetic leg visible beneath cargo shorts despite the rain, stood at the front. Behind him were Mike Ramirez, a former Navy corpsman who'd served in Afghanistan, Dave Wilson, an Air Force pararescue veteran, and Keith Thompson, a burly ex-Army Ranger who now worked as a high school football coach. Evening, gentlemen, Calloway said, unable to hide a small smile despite the circumstances. Don't recall issuing an invitation, Ryan grinned. Figured we'd crash the party anyway. Heard through the grapevine there might be trouble. His gaze shifted to Sheriff Malone. Evening, Sheriff. We're just here to check on our friend. Nothing illegal about that. Malone looked exasperated. Spencer, this is an active law enforcement situation. We have information about an imminent attack on this property by armed suspects. All the more reason for us to be here, Ryan replied calmly. More eyes on the perimeter. I can't deputize civilians. Not asking to be deputized, Keith Thompson interjected. Just visiting our buddy during a difficult time. We'll sit quietly on the porch if need be. Malone looked to Calloway, who simply shrugged. They're stubborn. Men, Dan, gets beaten into you in the service. After a moment's consideration, the sheriff nodded reluctantly. Fine, but you stay inside, away from windows, and follow any instructions from me or my deputies without question. Clear? Crystal, Ryan agreed for all of them. As they moved inside, introductions were made to Tessa, who seemed overwhelmed by the sudden influx of people. Dave Wilson, whose medical training as a pararescue jumper had translated to a civilian career, as a physician's assistant, examined her bruised face with gentle efficiency. No fracture, he concluded, but you'll want to keep ice on it. 20 minutes on, 20 off. Outside, more sheriff's department vehicles arrived, positioning themselves strategically around the property. Malone coordinated with his deputies, via radio, establishing a perimeter and setting up roadblocks on both ends of the rural road. All right, the sheriff said, addressing the room. We have the house secured, roadblocks in place, and deputies in the woods covering all likely approach vectors. Ms. Reeves, you said they planned to come around midnight? Tessa nodded. That was the plan when I left. But if they've discovered I'm gone, and that I took Crusher's truck, they might change their timeline. Or abandon the plan entirely, Reynolds suggested hopefully. Ryan Spencer shook his head. Men like that, with wounded pride and liquid courage, they won't back down. They'll view it as weakness. Agreed, Calloway said. We should prepare as if they're still coming, but perhaps more cautiously now. Malone nodded. I've got 8 deputies positioned outside. If they approach, we'll intercept them before they reach the house. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Tessa sat with Dave Wilson, who kept a professional eye on her bruising while engaging her in quiet conversation, distracting her from the tension. Ryan and Calloway stood by the kitchen window, carefully peering through the blinds at the rain-soaked yard illuminated by occasional flashes of lightning. "Just like that night outside Kandahar," Ryan murmured. "Remember? When that Taliban cell tried to hit our forward base?" Calloway nodded. He'd been attached to Ryan's unit as a liaison during a joint operation. Waited all night for an attack that didn't come until dawn. "They think we lose focus at first light. Mistake." At 12:30 a.m., Malone received a radio call that drew everyone's attention. "Sheriff, this is Unit 4 at the South Roadblock. We just stopped a pickup truck trying to turn around when they spotted us. 2 male occupants, both intoxicated. Neither matches the descriptions of our suspects. They claim they were looking for a party at Lakeside Drive and got lost." "Roger that. Check IDs, conduct field sobriety, and send them on their way if everything checks out." Malone looked at Tessa. Could be innocent civilians, could be scouts. She shrugged helplessly. "I don't know about any scouts, but Crusher's smart when it comes to planning bad things." At 12:45 a.m., another call came through. "Sheriff, Unit 2 here. We've got movement in the woods east of the property. Heat signatures on thermal. At least 3 individuals, moving slowly toward the house." Malone immediately shifted into high alert. "Roger that. Hold positions but do not engage unless they approach the designated perimeter or display weapons. I want them contained, not scattered." He turned to the room. "Everyone stays put. Ms. Reeves, Mr. Calloway, you two stay in the hallway away from windows." He pointed to the veterans. "Gentlemen, I can't stop you from being here, but I need you to stay clear of my deputy's line of fire." The tension in the house ratcheted up several notches. Calloway led Tessa to the hallway as instructed, but found himself unwilling to hide while others defended his home. He caught Ryan's eye, a silent communication passing between them. "Sheriff," Ryan said calmly, "we have combat experience and training in these exact scenarios. Let us help secure the house interior while your men handle the exterior." Malone hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine, but no heroics. If they breach the perimeter, you get everyone to the safe room and let my deputies handle it." The radio crackled again. "Sheriff, this is Unit 2. Subjects have split up, 2 continuing toward the house, 1 circling toward the north. Wait, we've got 2 more heat signatures approaching from the west. That's 5 total, matching our intel. All units, maintain positions but be prepared to converge on my command," Malone ordered. He turned to Calloway. "Where's your best defensive position inside?" "Basement has a reinforced storm shelter," Calloway replied. "Concrete walls, steel, door. Installed it after the tornado hit Preston County in '09. Perfect. Ms. Reeves, Deputy Reynolds will escort you down there now." "No," she said firmly, surprising everyone. "I can identify them. I need to be where I can see who approaches. Those could be innocent people out there." Malone looked like he wanted to argue, but was interrupted by another radio call. "Sheriff, shots fired at the South Roadblock, officers returning fire." The sharp crack of gunfire was audible even through the rain, coming from the direction of the road. Malone grabbed his radio. "Report! What's happening at the South checkpoint?" 2 males in a black pickup rammed the barricade and opened fire. 1 deputy was wounded, not critical. Suspects abandoned vehicles and fled into the woods heading north, toward the house. Malone swore under his breath. "It's a diversion. All units converge on the house perimeter now." As if to confirm his assessment, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Emergency flashlights clicked on as the sheriff and deputies drew their weapons. "Generator," Calloway said calmly, moving to a panel near the kitchen. He flipped several switches, and moments later, low-powered emergency lights activated in strategic locations throughout the house. Military habit, always have backup systems. "James," Malone said urgently, "get everyone into that shelter now. We've got multiple armed suspects approaching, at least 2 of my deputies pinned down at the roadblock, and now no visibility outside." But Calloway's attention had shifted to the back of the house, where a soft scraping sound came from the mudroom door. He raised a hand for silence, then pointed. Ryan and Keith immediately moved to flank the door, their movements fluid and practiced, despite their civilian clothes and years removed from combat. The lock on the mudroom door clicked, then turned slowly. Someone had a key or lock picks. Calloway felt a cold realization. They had taken his spare key during the earlier break-in. Sheriff Malone positioned himself with a clear shot at the door, gesturing for Reynolds to cover Tessa. The young deputy moved her behind the kitchen island, his service weapon drawn. The door began to open, inch by agonizing inch. A beam of light swept across the mudroom floor. Then a voice, pitched low but clear. "I know you're in there, old man. Should have minded your own business yesterday. Now everybody pays." Crusher. "Miller," Sheriff Malone called out, using Crusher's real name. "This is Sheriff Malone. The house is surrounded by law enforcement. Put down your weapons and come out with your hands up." A harsh laugh came from behind the partially opened door. "Nice try. Your boys are scrambling all over the woods chasing shadows. By the time they figure it out, we'll be long gone, and your war hero will be decorating his walls in a whole new color." Calloway stepped forward, ignoring Malone's warning gesture. "Miller, there's a young woman in here who says you hit her. That true?" A moment of silence, then, "Tessa? That little bitch is with you?" Crusher's voice took on an ugly edge. "Guess I'll have to deal with two problems tonight." "You're not dealing with anything except jail time," Malone responded. "We have you on breaking and entering, vandalism, assault, and now attempted murder of a peace officer. You're looking at decades behind bars." "Only if I get caught," Crusher retorted. "And only if there are witnesses left." The door suddenly swung open wide as something was tossed into the room. A homemade flashbang device constructed from a road flare and fireworks. It detonated with a blinding flash and deafening noise that filled the confined space. Years of training kicked in. Calloway dropped to a crouch, shielding his eyes but keeping his orientation. Despite the ringing in his ears, he could make out the sound of boots on the mudroom floor, multiple sets. Sheriff Malone and Deputy Reynolds recovered quickly, their law enforcement training serving them well. The veterans, similarly conditioned to such tactics, had already taken defensive positions. Through the lingering smoke emerged three figures, Crusher in the lead, followed by Snake, and a tall, muscular man Calloway didn't recognize from the gas station encounter. Likely one of Brick's cousins. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but would be replayed in slow motion in Calloway's memory for years to come. Crusher raised a revolver, aiming at the first shape he could make out through the dissipating smoke, Tessa, who had been knocked to the floor by the blast. At the same moment, Reynolds moved to shield her with his body, his service weapon tracking toward Crusher. Malone shouted, "Police! Drop your weapons!" Ryan and Keith converged from the flanks, years of combat training evident in their coordinated movements. Snake, seeing the sheriff, swung his own weapon toward Malone. Calloway, with the clarity that comes in moments of extreme danger, saw it all unfolding toward inevitable tragedy. His hand found the Beretta, still tucked in his waistband from earlier. As multiple weapons raised, as fingers tightened on triggers, a new sound cut through the chaos. The unmistakable pump action of a shotgun being racked, amplified in the confined space. "Everybody freeze!" roared a voice from behind Crusher's group. Standing in the doorway was Brick, his massive frame silhouetted against the rain, a 12-gauge shotgun held at eye level. But surprisingly, it wasn't pointed at Calloway or the sheriff. It was aimed squarely at Crusher's back. The room froze in a tableau of tension. Crusher half-turned, keeping his revolver aimed at Tessa, but glancing over his shoulder at Brick. Confusion and rage battled across his features. "What the hell are you doing, man?" he snarled. Brick's expression remained impassive, the shotgun steady in his massive hands. "Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life, Brendan. You're with them now." Crusher's voice rose in disbelief. "After what this old man did to us?" "This has gone too far," Brick replied, his voice surprisingly calm for a man his size. Breaking into his house was one thing. Roughing up Tessa was another. But murder? Shooting at cops? No way. Snake's nervous gaze darted between Crusher and Brick, his small pistol wavering. The third man, one of Brick's cousins, looked equally uncertain, his hand hovering near a concealed weapon in his waistband. Sheriff Malone seized the moment. "Everyone put your weapons down now. This ends without bloodshed or it ends with all of you in body bags. Your choice." For a breathless second, no one moved. Then Brick spoke again, this time addressing Calloway directly. "My real name is Curtis Fleming. I served with the 10th Mountain Division, 2003 to 2007. 2 tours in Iraq." His eyes never left Crusher's back, but his words were clearly meant for the former Marine. "I lost my way when I came home. Found the wrong crowd, but I never forgot what serving meant." Calloway studied the big man, recognition dawning. The military bearing was there, beneath the biker exterior. "Fleming, you were at Tal Afar." Brick, Curtis, nodded once. "3rd Battalion." "My nephew was there. Staff Sergeant Paul Calloway." "Good man. Saved our asses during that ambush outside the marketplace." The connection hung in the air between them, an invisible thread of shared experience that transcended the current crisis. Crusher, sensing the shift, grew more agitated. "You're both crazy. Swapping war stories while we're in the middle of this?" He jabbed his revolver toward Tessa, who flinched. "She betrayed us. The old man humiliated us. And now you're taking their side?" "There are no sides here, Miller," Sheriff Malone interjected. "Just right and wrong. And you're about to cross a line you can't come back from." The tall man beside Crusher, Vince Fleming, finally spoke. "Kurt, what the hell? You called us for backup, said this was about teaching someone a lesson. You didn't say nothing about killing cops or women." "He didn't know," Curtis replied, nodding toward Crusher. "This was his plan. Got out of hand when Tessa left and took his keys." He shifted his gaze to his cousin. "You know I wouldn't drag you into murder, Vince. We're not those guys." Snake, the most volatile of the group, grew visibly anxious. "Crusher, man, maybe we should bail. There's too many of them, and now Brick's—" "Shut up," Crusher snapped. His hand tightened on his revolver, knuckles white. "Nobody's bailing. We came to finish this, and that's what—" A sudden motion from Tessa broke the standoff. Still on the floor where the flashbang had knocked her down, she kicked out hard, her boot connecting with Crusher's knee. He howled in pain, his leg buckling. As his revolver discharged into the ceiling, chaos erupted. Curtis charged forward, tackling Snake before he could aim his pistol at Malone. The shotgun clattered to the floor as both men crashed into the kitchen counter. Vince raised his hands in immediate surrender, dropping to his knees as Deputy Reynolds trained his weapon on him. Ryan and Keith moved with practiced efficiency, flanking Crusher, who was still off balance from Tessa's kick. Before he could recover, Ryan's prosthetic leg swept Crusher's feet from under him, while Keith disarmed him with a textbook wrist lock. Sheriff Malone immediately took control, shouting commands as he pulled handcuffs from his belt. "Everyone on? The ground now! Hands behind your back!" Within seconds, the threat had been neutralized. The 3 intruders lay prone on the kitchen floor, deputies applying handcuffs while Malone radioed for backup and medical assistance for minor injuries. Calloway helped Tessa to her feet. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he told her, a note of respect in his voice. She winced, rubbing her ankle. "Maybe both. I owed him for this." She touched the bruise on her face. Curtis Fleming, now sitting against the kitchen cabinet, under Reynolds's watchful eye, looked up at Calloway. "I never wanted it to go this far. When I found out what they did to your house earlier, I tried to talk Crusher down. But he was obsessed with getting even." Malone approached, holstering his weapon but maintaining a professional distance. "Fleming, you're still looking at charges for the earlier break-in and vandalism. But what you did tonight will count in—" "Your favor," Curtis nodded grimly. I understand, Sheriff. I'll take what's coming. As additional deputies arrived to transport the prisoners, Malone pulled Calloway aside. You okay? Fine, Calloway replied, though the adrenaline crash was beginning to make itself felt in his tired muscles. What about your deputy at the roadblock? Flesh. Wound to the arm. He'll be okay. Malone rubbed his face wearily. This could have gone sideways in 100 different ways. But it didn't, Calloway pointed out. Thanks to good training and a few unexpected allies. The sheriff glanced toward Curtis, who was being led out in handcuffs, head bowed. Former military, huh? Seems like you boys have a way of recognizing each other, even on opposite sides. Not opposite sides, Calloway corrected. Just different paths. The training, the brotherhood, stays with you. By 3 a.m., the house had been cleared. Crusher, Snake, and Vince were transported to county jail on multiple felony charges. Curtis Fleming and his cousin Tony, who had been the driver of the truck that rammed the roadblock, were also arrested, though Malone noted their cooperation would be considered during charging. Tessa gave her statement to a female deputy, who arranged temporary emergency housing for her at a women's shelter in the next county, well away from anywhere Crusher's remaining associates might look for her. As the law enforcement vehicles departed one by one, Ryan and the other veterans remained, helping Calloway clean up the mess left by the confrontation. Some support group meeting this turned out to be, Ryan remarked, sweeping up broken glass from the flashbang. Still better than last month when Doug brought that awful banana bread. The joke broke the lingering tension, eliciting tired laughs from everyone. Even Calloway smiled, though his mind was elsewhere. You're thinking about Fleming, aren't you? Mike Ramirez asked, always perceptive about his fellow veterans' moods. Calloway nodded. 10th Mountain Division. They were in some of the worst fighting in Talafar. My nephew spoke highly of his unit. Coming home is the hardest deployment, Dave Wilson observed, his medic's eyes checking everyone for signs of post-adrenaline crash. Some guys find their way back to civilian life. Others end up like Brick, Keith finished, finding brotherhood wherever they can, even if it's with the wrong crowd. Calloway made a decision. I'm going to talk to Malone tomorrow, see if there's anything that can be done for Fleming. Ryan nodded approvingly. No Marine left behind, even if he was in the Army. By dawn, the house was reasonably restored to order. The veterans departed with promises to check in later, leaving Calloway alone in the sudden quiet. He made coffee, strong and black, and sat on his porch watching the sunrise burn away the last of the night's rain clouds. His phone rang at 7:30 a.m. Emily. Dad, are you okay? I just saw on the news there was some kind of police standoff at your place last night. Calloway sighed. Small-town news traveled fast. I'm fine, honey. Just a follow-up to that gas station incident. Everything's resolved now. Resolved? Dad? They're saying there were multiple arrests and a deputy was shot. Wounded, not shot, he corrected automatically. Minor injury. Look, I'll explain everything when I come over to help Tyler with his model plane later today. Absolutely not, Emily declared firmly. You're coming over for breakfast right now, and you're going to tell me exactly what happened. Recognizing the futile battle, Calloway agreed. Give me 30 minutes to shower and change. After a quick cleanup, he drove to Emily's house, noting with amusement that both her car and Mark's were in the driveway. They'd called in to work to be home for this conversation. Emily opened the door before he could knock, scanning him for injuries before pulling him into a fierce hug. You promised no more dangerous situations, she murmured into his shoulder. The situation found me, he replied gently. But it's over now. Inside, Mark Williams sat at the kitchen table with Tyler and Abby, who were happily demolishing pancakes. Mark rose to shake Calloway's hand, concern evident in his eyes. The kids don't know anything, he said in a low voice. Just that Grandpa is coming for breakfast. Calloway nodded gratefully. Let's keep it that way. Breakfast was a welcome slice of normality. Tyler chattering about his model airplane, Abby insisting Calloway admire her newest crayon masterpiece, and Emily maintaining a brave face despite her obvious worry. When the kids were finally excused to go play, Emily turned to her father with determined eyes. "Now, tell us everything." Calloway did, giving them a sanitized but honest account of the previous night's events. Mark listened in astonished silence while Emily's expression cycled between horror, fear, and reluctant pride. "So this biker, Brick, he turned on his friends to help you?" Mark asked, clearly trying to process the unexpected twist. "Not exactly to help me," Calloway clarified. "To stop his friends from crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Once he realized Crusher was planning murder, something in him, the soldier he used to be, couldn't go along with it." Emily shook her head. "It's also... I don't even know what to say. You could have been killed, Dad." "But I wasn't," he pointed out. "And neither was anyone else. Thanks to dumb luck. Thanks to training, backup, and someone making the right choice at the right moment," Calloway corrected gently. "That's not luck, Emily. That's what happens when good people step up." She looked away, blinking back tears. "You've done your stepping up, Dad. 22 years of it. When do you get to just be safe?" Mark placed a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder. "I think what Emily's trying to say is that we worry about you. Living out there alone, getting involved in situations like this." Calloway understood their concern. Since retiring from the Marines and moving back to his hometown, he'd maintained his independence fiercely, perhaps too fiercely. The previous night had shown him the value of connections, of having people who had your back. "I've been thinking about that," he said slowly. "Not about moving in with you," he added quickly, seeing Emily's expression brighten hopefully, "but about being more connected." "What do you mean?" she asked. "The veterans group I work with. They showed up last night without being asked because that's what we do for each other. And this morning, I realized I want to do more of that. Helping. Guys like Curtis Fleming find their way back before they end up in situations like this." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "The transition program you mentioned starting at the VFW?" "Exactly. Sheriff Malone called while I was on my way here. He's willing to talk to the DA about a reduced sentence for Curtis if he agrees to participate in a veteran rehabilitation program." Calloway leaned forward. "I'm going to propose creating that program myself." Emily studied her father's face. "This is really important to you, isn't it?" "It is. What happened at the gas station and after, it reminded me that there are men out there who served their country and came home lost. Some find their way back on their own. Others need a map." The conversation was interrupted by Tyler bursting into the kitchen, airplane model in hand. "Grandpa, I added the decals. Want to see?" The adults exchanged looks, silent agreement passing between them to continue the discussion later. Calloway turned his attention to his grandson, examining the model with exaggerated care. "Outstanding work, Airman," he said seriously. "That's museum quality right there." Tyler beamed with pride. "Can we hang it from my ceiling today?" "You promised." "I did, didn't I? Well, a Marine never breaks a promise. Let's get the fishing line and hooks from my truck." As they walked outside, Tyler's small hand in his, Calloway felt a sense of perspective settle over him. The previous night's danger seemed distant in the face of this simple moment of connection. "Grandpa?" Tyler looked up at him, suddenly serious. "Mom said you helped some people last night. Were you being brave again?" Calloway considered how to answer. "I was just being who I am, buddy. Sometimes that means standing up when it would be easier to sit down." "Like a hero." "No, like a man who remembers what's important." He squeezed his grandson's hand. "And right now, what's important is getting that P-51 Mustang airborne in your room. Mission critical, as we say in the Corps." Tyler giggled. "Military. seriousness forgotten. Race you to the truck. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Malone visited Calloway at home. The house had been further cleaned up, though the bullet hole in the kitchen ceiling remained as a stark reminder of how close things had come to tragedy. "How's the deputy?" Calloway asked, offering coffee on the front porch. "Jenkins? Doctor says he'll be back on duty in a week." Malone accepted the mug gratefully. "Listen, about Fleming and his cousin, the DA is willing to consider a plea deal, given the circumstances. And the fact that without them, we might all be planning funerals today?" Malone nodded grimly. "That too. The cousin, Tony, is looking at minimal charges. He panicked when the roadblock came up, but he didn't fire any shots. As for Curtis, the DA's offering a deal that includes enrollment in a veteran transition program, supervised probation, and community service. There's just one problem," Calloway noted. "We don't have a transition program. Not yet." Malone gave him a meaningful look. "But I hear a highly respected former Marine Master Sergeant might be starting one." Calloway smiled slightly. "Word travels fast." "Small town." Malone sipped his coffee. "For what it's worth, I think it's a good idea. There are more vets out there like Curtis, guys who served honorably but lost their way after. They need someone who speaks their language." "And Crusher and Snake?" "Looking at a serious time. Assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder of a peace officer, breaking and entering, criminal threatening, the list goes on." Malone shook his head. "Some people can't be reached." Calloway wasn't so sure, but he kept the thought to himself. In his experience, even the most hardened individuals could change if given the right motivation and tools. Perhaps not Crusher, but time had a way of shifting perspectives. "What about Tessa?" he asked instead. "Safe at the women's shelter. She's agreed to testify against Crusher in exchange for immunity on any related charges. Given her cooperation and the circumstances, the DA is inclined to be generous." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. Finally, Malone spoke again. "You know, when I responded to that gas station call yesterday, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Calloway nodded. "Small actions, big ripples. Would you do it again? Step in like that?" The question hung in the air as Calloway considered. Would he? Knowing where it led, the danger it brought not just to him but to his family and friends? "Yes," he said finally. "Some things you do because they're easy. Some things you do because they're hard. But the important things, you do them because they're right, no matter the cost." Malone raised his coffee mug in a small salute. "Semper Fi." "Semper Fi," Calloway echoed, his gaze drifting to the woods beyond his property line where, in the distance, he could just make out the Veterans Memorial that stood in the town square. A reminder of those who had served, those who had fallen, and those who still carried the weight of both with them every day. Tomorrow he will begin making calls about that transition program. Tonight, he would repair the bullet hole in his ceiling, clean his service pistol, and return it to its safe, and call Ryan Spencer to thank him properly for showing up uninvited. The gas station incident had started as a simple act of standing up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves. It had cascaded into something larger, more complex, with consequences both painful and promising, just like life itself. 3 months after the confrontation at his home, James Calloway stood in the renovated back room of the Millfield VFW Post, 2178, surveying the space with critical eyes. Folding chairs formed a circle in the center. A coffee station occupied one corner, while a table along the wall held pamphlets on VA benefits, job training programs, and mental health resources. "What, do you think?" Ryan Spencer asked, wheeling himself in with a box of donuts balanced on his lap. In the weeks following the incident, Ryan's prosthetic leg had developed issues, forcing him back into his wheelchair temporarily while waiting for adjustments. "It'll do," Calloway replied, though his slight smile betrayed his satisfaction. Not exactly Pentagon-level accommodations, but better than half the barracks we slept in, Ryan finished with a laugh. He set the donut box on a small table and glanced at his watch. First meeting starts in 30 minutes. Nervous? Calloway straightened a row of chairs unnecessarily. Marines don't get nervous. Right. And Army Rangers don't like donuts. Ryan grabbed one from the box. Seriously, though, this is good work, Master Sergeant. Long overdue in this county. The Veterans Transition Program, as they'd named it, had come together with surprising speed. Sheriff Malone had connected Calloway with county officials and the VA regional office. The VFW had enthusiastically donated the space. Local businesses contributed supplies and refreshments. Even the county judge had gotten involved, establishing a Veterans Court diversion program for qualifying cases. The first test case of that program would be attending today. Curtis Fleming, recently released. On probation with the transition program as a mandatory condition, his cousin Tony had received a suspended sentence with community service, already serving his hours at the county animal shelter. A knock at the door interrupted Calloway's thoughts. Emily stood in the doorway, holding a large thermos. "Fresh coffee," she announced. "The stuff at the diner was awful, so I made some at home." "You didn't have to come by," Calloway said, though he was clearly pleased. Emily set down the thermos and straightened her father's collar. "I wanted to see the place. Besides, Mark's handling the kids' Saturday sports, so I had time." Since the B incident, Emily had shifted from protectiveness to cautious support of her father's new project. She still worried, but she'd begun to understand his need to continue serving in some capacity. "It's nice," she said, looking around. "Feels welcome." "That's the idea." Calloway checked his watch. "Participants will be arriving soon. You should probably go. I know." She hugged him quickly. "Call me later and tell me how it went. And you're still coming for Sunday dinner tomorrow?" "Wouldn't miss it. Tyler promised to show me his science project." After Emily left, Ryan and Calloway made final preparations. Keith Thompson arrived next, followed by Mike Ramirez and Dave Wilson. The core group from the Veterans Support Group had all volunteered to help launch the transition program, each bringing unique skills and experiences. At precisely 10 a.m., the first participants began to arrive. The initial group was small, just 6 veterans, including Curtis. They entered cautiously with the wariness of men entering unfamiliar territory. Calloway recognized the look. He'd worn it himself upon returning from combat zones to civilian life. Curtis arrived last, accompanied by his probation officer who spoke briefly with Calloway before departing. The former biker looked different in jeans and a plain button-down shirt, his massive frame somehow less intimidating without the leather vest and insignia. "Fleming," Calloway greeted him with a nod. "Glad you made it." Curtis shifted uncomfortably. "Not like I had much choice. Condition of my probation." "True. But you could have shown up late, sat in the back, and gone through the motions." Calloway gestured to the circle of chairs. "Instead, you're here on time, making eye contact. Tells me something." A ghost of a smile touched Curtis's face. "Old habits." "Good habits," Calloway corrected. "Military habits. They stay with you." The meeting began simply: introductions, ground rules, explanations of the program's structure and goals. Calloway kept it informal but focused, drawing on his years of experience leading Marines of diverse backgrounds and temperaments. "This isn't therapy," he explained, "though we have resources for that if you want them. This isn't a job placement service, though we can help with that too. What this is, fundamentally, is a bridge from where you are now to where you want to be, built by people who've walked similar paths." He noticed Curtis listening intently, his initial reluctance fading. "Some of you are here by choice," Calloway continued. "Others by court order. Doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you're here, and that means you've already taken the hardest step. Ryan took over, explaining his own journey from combat injury to civilian life. Lost my leg, but found a purpose, he said, tapping his prosthetic. Took me 3 years of anger and painkillers to figure out I wasn't broken, just changed. The session progressed with each veteran sharing as much or as little as they felt comfortable with. Some spoke at length about their struggles. Others simply stated their name and service branch. All were respected equally. When Curtis's turn came, he cleared his throat nervously. Curtis Fleming, Army, 10th Mountain Division, 2003 to 2007, 2 tours in Iraq. He paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. Came home with all my limbs, but left something over there anyway. Been trying to find it ever since. The simple honesty of the statement resonated through the room. Several veterans nodded in recognition. What I found instead was trouble, Curtis added. Thought I'd found brotherhood again with my motorcycle club, but it wasn't the same. Not even close. He glanced at Calloway. Recent events made that pretty clear. After the formal portion ended, the veterans broke into smaller conversations over coffee and donuts. Calloway observed from a distance, allowing them space to connect naturally. Ryan wheeled over to join him. Not bad for a first session, Ryan remarked. Calloway nodded. They opened up more than I expected. That's because you didn't try to fix them, Ryan said. Most civilians want to solve the broken veteran problem. You just created space for them to be heard. Curtis approached them hesitantly, coffee cup in hand. Master Sergeant, can I have a word? Ryan excused himself tactfully, leaving the two alone. What's on your mind, Fleming? Calloway asked. I wanted to ask about Tessa. Is she okay? They won't. Tell me anything because of the restraining order against Crusher. Calloway studied him carefully. She's doing well. Got a job at a diner in Preston County, taking some community college classes. Sheriff Malone checks in on her weekly. Relief crossed Curtis's face. Good, that's good. She deserved better than getting caught up in our mess. Your mess or Crusher's mess? Curtis considered this. Both, I guess, but Crusher was the one who hit her. I should have stopped that. But you did stop things from getting worse, Calloway pointed out. When it counted most. They fell silent for a moment before Curtis spoke again. I keep thinking about that night. How different it could have been if I hadn't made the choice. I did. That's the thing about choices, Fleming. They define us more than our circumstances do. Curtis nodded thoughtfully. My probation officer mentioned you spoke to the judge on my behalf. Why would you do that after what we did to your house? Because I've been where you are, Calloway replied simply. Lost between two worlds, belonging to neither. The difference was I had the core, structure, purpose, brotherhood, until I figured out how to build a civilian life. You got dropped back into the world with skills that don't translate and experiences nobody understands. Curtis looked at him with newfound respect. So, this program is about creating that bridge I mentioned, the one I had and you didn't. As the meeting wound down, participants exchanged contact information and made plans to attend the next session. Curtis lingered until the others had left. I've been doing some thinking, he said finally, about what comes next after my probation ends. And? The Army taught me mechanics. I was good at it. Thought maybe I could get back into that line of work. But with my record now... He shrugged helplessly. As it happens, Calloway said, I know someone who might be willing to look past that. 2 days later, Calloway sat across from Lou Martinez, owner of Martinez Auto Repair on the edge of town. At 68, Lou had been running the business for over 40 years and was considering retirement with no clear successor. Let me get this straight, Lou said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. You want me to hire an ex-biker who broke into your house and vandalized the place? Ex-Army mechanic, Calloway corrected. 10th Mountain Division, 2 tours in Iraq, And yes, he made some poor choices after leaving the service. But he's also the reason my family and I are alive. Lou raised a bushy eyebrow. That part wasn't in the news reports. No, it wasn't. Calloway explained the full story, including Curtis's crucial intervention. When he finished, Lou leaned back in his chair, considering. My nephew was on the 10th mountain. Different time. Frame, but still. He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. I can't offer full-time work yet, but I could use help 3 days a week. If he proves himself, we can talk about more hours. That's all I'm asking. A chance. Lou nodded. Send him by tomorrow. We'll see what he knows about engines. Curtis started work at Martinez Auto Repair the following week. Initially quiet and reserved, he gradually began to display the skills that had made him a valued mechanic in the Army. Lou, a demanding but fair employer, found himself impressed. Kid knows his way around an engine, he told Calloway during one of his regular oil changes. Still rough around the edges, but he's punctual, respectful, and doesn't cut corners. Military training, Calloway said with a hint of pride. Whatever it is, I wish my younger guys had it. Meanwhile, the Veterans Transition Program continued to grow. Word spread throughout the county, bringing new participants each week. Some came voluntarily, others through the Court Diversion Program, or VA, referrals. Each brought unique challenges and perspectives. Calloway found himself busier than he'd been since retirement, dividing his time between the program, his family, and his woodworking. The rhythm of purpose filled his days in a way that had been missing. On a crisp Saturday morning, 6 months after the inaugural meeting, Calloway arrived at the VFW to find Curtis already there, setting up chairs. Didn't know you were on setup duty today, Calloway remarked. Curtis shrugged. Thought I'd come in early. Got something to share in the meeting that I'm actually looking forward to. Curiosity piqued, Calloway helped finish the preparations. By 10 a.m., the room was filled with 23 veterans, their largest group yet. The format had evolved over time, but the core principles remained: respect, honesty, and practical support. When it came time for updates from the group, Curtis raised his hand. Lou offered me full-time work starting next month, he announced. And I've been approved for an apartment in town. No more weekly motel rooms. The group applauded, genuinely pleased for him. Curtis had become something of a success story for the program, his progress serving as motivation for newer participants. There's more, he continued. I've been in touch with my daughter. Haven't seen her in 8 years, not since her mother and I split. She's 17 now, graduating high school next spring. She's agreed to meet me for lunch next weekend. The room fell silent, understanding the magnitude of this development. Many of them had similar estrangements, relationships fractured by deployment, PTSD, addiction, or simply the difficulty of reconnecting after military service. That's outstanding, Fleming, Calloway said warmly. Big step. Curtis nodded, uncharacteristic emotion in his eyes. Wouldn't have happened without this program, without all of you. After the meeting, Calloway found himself walking downtown with Ryan, who had recently received his adjusted prosthetic and was eager to use it. Have you heard from Tessa lately? Ryan asked as they strolled past the town square. Sheriff Malone says she's doing well. Finished her GED last month, applying to nursing programs for the fall semester. And our not-so-friendly neighborhood, bikers? Calloway's expression darkened slightly. Crusher, Brendan Miller, got 15 years. With his prior record, he'll serve at least 10. Snake took a plea deal, got 7 years with possibility of parole after 4. They walked in silence, for a moment, passing the gas station where it had all begun. Kayla Wilson still worked there, though she was now in her final year of nursing school. She waved cheerfully from behind the register. Ever think about how different things might have been if you hadn't stepped in that day? Ryan asked. Calloway considered the question. Sometimes. But that kind of thinking leads nowhere useful. You make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. That's all any of us can do. Still, Ryan persisted. One small action, leading to all this. He gestured broadly, encompassing the town, the program, all that had transpired. Ripple effect, Calloway agreed. Though I wouldn't call it small. Standing up for what's right is never small, even when it seems simple at the time. They reached the Veterans Memorial, a modest stone monument listing the names of local service members who had fallen in conflicts from World War I to Afghanistan. Calloway paused, his fingers tracing the engraved name of his older brother, lost in Vietnam before James was old enough to enlist. "This is why we do it," he said quietly. "Not just for them, but for ourselves. To make sure their sacrifice meant something. To live lives worthy of what they gave." Ryan nodded soberly. "Mission continues. Always does." That evening, Calloway sat on his front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. His home had been fully repaired, the bullet hole in the ceiling patched, the damaged furniture replaced. Yet the house felt different now, no longer just a place of solitary retreat, but a point of connection in a widening circle of relationships. His phone buzzed with a text. From Emily. "Tyler got an A on his science project. Says it's because his grandpa helped him understand structural integrity, whatever that means. We're celebrating with ice cream. Come join?" Calloway smiled and replied that he'd be there in 15 minutes. As he rose to go inside, he noticed a motorcycle approaching slowly down his rural road. For a brief moment, old tension returned, until he recognized Curtis on a modest used Harley, recently purchased with his savings from Martinez Auto Repair. Curtis pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. "Evening, Master Sergeant. Hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Though I'm headed out shortly. Family celebration." Curtis nodded. "Won't keep you. Just wanted to drop this off." He handed Calloway a small paper bag. "Made it in shop class back. In high school. Found it when I was packing for my new apartment. Thought you might appreciate it." Inside the bag was a polished brass belt buckle, expertly crafted in the shape of the 10th Mountain Division insignia. "Wore it proudly for years," Curtis explained. "Then put it away when I thought that part of my life was behind me. Seems right, that you should have it now." Calloway turned the buckle over in his hands, feeling the weight of its significance. "I'm honored, but this belongs with you, Fleming. It's part of your history, your identity." "Which you helped me reclaim," Curtis insisted. "I've got my division patches and medals again. Hung them on my wall last week for the first time in years. The buckle is my way of saying thanks." Recognizing the importance of the gesture, Calloway nodded. "I accept. Thank you." As Curtis prepared to leave, Calloway added, "By the way, we're having a cookout next weekend after the Saturday meeting. Informal gathering for program participants and their families. You're welcome to join us." "Even though I'm technically still on probation?" "Especially because of that. It's important for everyone to see what progress looks like." Curtis smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. "I'd like that." After he rode away, Calloway placed the belt buckle carefully on his mantle before heading out to join his family. The evening air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. At the gas station, he stopped to fill his tank. Kayla Wilson waved from inside, and Martha Davidson pulled up to the adjacent pump, delighted. "To see him?" "Master Sergeant Calloway, just the man I wanted to see. My grandson is considering the Marines, and I thought perhaps you might speak with him." "I'd be honored, ma'am," he replied sincerely. Life had returned to normal in Millfield, or perhaps, Calloway reflected, it had evolved into something better than normal, something more connected, more purposeful. As he drove toward Emily's house, where Tyler waited excitedly to share his achievement, Calloway felt a deep sense of contentment. The path from that fateful evening at the gas station had been unexpected and at times dangerous, but it had led to this moment of clarity. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought on foreign soil, but on home ground. Standing up for what was right, extending a hand to those who had lost their way, building bridges between the worlds of military service and civilian life. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always safe. But it was always worth it. 1 year after the confrontation at the gas station, Millfield had settled into a new normal. The Veterans Transition Program had become a fixture in the community, expanding to 3 weekly meetings with over 40 regular participants. James Calloway found himself busier than he'd been during his final years in the Corps, dividing time between the program, his family, and occasional consulting work with the county's emergency management office. On a crisp autumn morning, Calloway sat in Sheriff Malone's office, reviewing plans for a joint veterans outreach initiative. The sheriff had lost 20 pounds in the past year and looked younger despite the gray hair at his temples. County commissioners approved the funding. Yesterday, Malone announced, sliding a document across his desk. 2 part-time positions for the Veterans Court Program, specifically for peer counselors with military experience. Calloway reviewed the paperwork with satisfaction. This will make a real difference, Dan. Having veterans guide other veterans through the legal system. It's exactly what we needed. Your testimony at the budget hearing sealed it, Malone replied. When you laid out the cost savings of diversion programs versus incarceration, even the fiscal conservatives couldn't argue. Their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. Deputy Reynolds entered, looking troubled. Sorry to interrupt, Sheriff, but there's a situation you both should know about. He glanced at Calloway. It concerns Brendan Miller. Calloway felt a familiar tension in his shoulders at the mention of Crusher's name. What about him? He was transferred to the medical unit at State Correctional last week. Apparently, he has late-stage pancreatic cancer. Doctors are giving him 3 to 6 months. The news landed with unexpected weight. Calloway had spent little time thinking about Crusher over the past year, focusing instead on the positive developments stemming from that night. There's more, Reynolds continued. He's requested compassionate release to hospice care. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Malone frowned. After serving barely a year of his sentence? Not likely. Actually, Reynolds said uncomfortably, the DA's office isn't opposing it, given the circumstances. His attorney submitted medical documentation confirming the diagnosis is terminal. A heavy silence filled the room. Calloway found himself experiencing a complex mixture of emotions, not satisfaction or vindication, but something more like solemn recognition of mortality's equalizing power. Thank you for letting us know, Deputy, Malone said finally. Reynolds nodded and withdrew, leaving the sheriff and Calloway alone with the news. You're quiet, Malone observed. Calloway shrugged slightly. Not much to say. Cancer's a harsh sentence, regardless of a man's crimes. Harsher than he deserved? There was genuine curiosity in Malone's voice. Justice and mercy aren't mutually exclusive, Dan. Never have been. The conversation shifted back to official business, but the news about Crusher lingered in Calloway's mind throughout the day. That evening, as he worked on a rocking chair in his workshop, a gift for Emily, who was expecting her 3rd child in December, the phone rang. Calloway, he answered, tucking the receiver between ear and shoulder as he continued sanding. Master Sergeant? It's Curtis Fleming. Curtis had completed his probation 3 months earlier and now worked full-time at Martinez Auto Repair. He'd become one of the transition program's success stories, mentoring newer participants while rebuilding his own life. Fleming, what can I do for you? I just heard about Crusher, about Brendan, the cancer. Curtis's voice was strained. Thought you should know he's been asking to speak with you. Calloway's hand stilled on the wood. With me? Why? I don't know exactly. His sister contacted me. Apparently, he's been asking for both of us. Did you talk to him? Not yet. Curtis hesitated. Wanted to discuss it with you first. This feels complicated. It is, Calloway agreed. When are you planning? To visit? Tomorrow afternoon. The sister says he's having good days and bad days. More bad than good lately. Calloway considered his options. He had no legal or moral obligation to visit a man who had tried to kill him and threatened his family. Yet something, perhaps the Marine's code of honor, perhaps simple human empathy, made him reluctant to refuse a dying man's request outright. Text me the details, he said finally. I'll meet you there. The next day, Calloway drove to Millfield Regional Medical Center, where Crusher had been transferred for palliative care following his compassionate release. The hospital's hospice wing was quieter than the main facility, the lighting softer, the atmosphere deliberately calming. Curtis waited in the visitor lounge, nervously turning a baseball cap in his massive hands. He'd lost weight, traded his beard for neatly trimmed stubble, and carried himself with a composure that spoke of hard-won stability. Didn't know if you'd actually come, he admitted as Calloway approached. Neither did I, Calloway replied honestly. How is he? Haven't gone in yet. His sister says he's lucid today but very weak. A middle-aged woman emerged from a nearby room. Angela Miller, Crusher's sister. Exhaustion lined her face, but she managed a polite greeting. Mr. Calloway. I'm Angela. Thank you for coming. No, this is unusual, given the history. How can we help? Calloway asked simply. Brendan's been asking for both of you for days. Whatever happened between you all? She struggled visibly with emotion. It's weighing on him at the end. The doctors say making peace is important for patients in his condition. Curtis looked uncomfortable. We didn't exactly part on good terms, Ms. Miller. I know. He's told me everything. About the gas station, about your home, Mr. Calloway, about what happened that night. He's not the same angry man he was a year ago. She glanced toward the room. Cancer has a way of changing perspectives. Calloway exchanged a look with Curtis, who gave a slight nod. We'll speak with him, Calloway decided. Angela led them to a private room where Brendan Crusher Miller lay connected to various monitors. The once imposing biker was dramatically diminished, his substantial frame now skeletal, his formerly ruddy complexion yellowed and ashen. Without his leather vest and defiant posture, he looked smaller, vulnerable, unmistakably human. His eyes opened as they entered, still blue, still alert, though clouded with pain and medication. Well, I'll be damned, he rasped. You both actually came. Curtis remained near the door, visibly uncomfortable, while Calloway approached the bed with the composure of a man who had witnessed death many times before. Miller, he acknowledged. Your sister said you wanted to see us. Crusher attempted to adjust his position, wincing with the effort. Figured I'd be the last person you'd want to see. You would have been a year ago? Calloway replied honestly. A weak smile flickered across Crusher's gaunt face. Fair enough. His gaze shifted to Curtis. Kurt, you look good. Heard you're straight now. Working at that garage. Curtis nodded stiffly. Lou gave me a chance. I took it. An awkward silence followed, broken only by the steady beep of medical equipment. Finally, Crusher spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Didn't ask you here for forgiveness. Don't deserve it, and we all know it. He coughed painfully, but I needed to say something to both of you before I check out. We're listening, Calloway said. That night at your house, Calloway, I came there to kill you. Was so full of hate and rage I couldn't see straight. Crusher's eyes fixed on the ceiling. Been thinking about it a lot in prison. What would have happened if I'd gone through with it? How many lives I would have destroyed. Not just yours, but your family's, Curtis's, mine. His breathing labored, he continued. When the doctors told me I was terminal, I got angry all over again. Different kinds, though. Angry at myself for wasting so much time on hate. Curtis finally moved closer. Why? Tell us this, Brendan? Because you both saw something I didn't back then. A way out. A different path. Crusher's fingers plucked restlessly at his blanket. You were right to stop me, Kurt. And you, Calloway. You were right at that gas station. The old lady didn't need our help. I was just being a bully because I could. Calloway observed the dying man thoughtfully. In his experience, deathbed conversions often stemmed from fear rather than genuine change. Yet there seemed to be authentic reflection in Crusher's words, the painful self-awareness of a man with nothing left to lose or gain. We all make choices, Calloway said finally. Some are better than others. My whole life was bad choices, Crusher admitted. But watching you two this past year, hearing about that veteran program, seeing Kurt turn himself around, made me wonder what might have been different if I'd found something like that when I came back from Desert Storm. The revelation surprised both visitors. You served? Curtis asked. Army, 1990 to 1991. Nothing heroic. Got an early discharge for misconduct. Came home angry, stayed that way. Crusher's bitter laugh dissolved into another coughing fit. When he recovered, he added, never talked about it. Didn't feel like I earned the right after how I left. The three veterans regarded each other in silence, connected by an unexpected thread of shared experience despite the drastically different paths they'd taken. I have something for you both, Crusher said finally. Angela, the drawer, his sister, retrieved 2 envelopes from the bedside table, handing one to each man. Calloway opened his to find a handwritten letter and a check for a substantial amount. It's my life insurance, Crusher explained, seeing their confusion. Split 3 ways. Sister, you and your veteran program. Not much, but it's all I've got to leave behind that might do some good. Calloway was genuinely taken aback. This isn't necessary, Miller. Maybe not for you, but it is for me. Crusher's eyes were insistent despite his weakened state. Let me do one thing right before I go. Curtis examined his own envelope, which contained a similar letter and a set of keys. What are these for? My Harley. She's in storage. Papers are signed over to you. Crusher managed a shadow of his old grin. Figure you earned it, standing up to me that night. Besides, your little Honda is embarrassing. The unexpected gift elicited a reluctant smile from Curtis. Never thought I'd own a real road king. Take better care of her than I did myself. Crusher's energy was visibly fading, his eyelids growing heavy. Angela stepped forward. He needs to rest now, but thank you both for coming. It means more than you know. Outside in the hospital parking lot, Calloway and Curtis processed the unexpected encounter in stunned silence. Did you know he was a veteran? Curtis finally asked. Calloway shook his head. Never came up in the reports. Probably didn't mention it during processing. Makes you wonder how many others are out there, veterans who fell through the cracks, ended up on the wrong path. Too many, Calloway acknowledged, though that's changing, slowly. Curtis stared at the keys in his hand. Not sure how I feel about taking his bike. How do you feel about respecting a dying man's wishes? That I can do, Curtis decided, pocketing the keys. What about the donation to the program? Calloway considered the check. We'll use it to establish a special fund for veterans who need immediate intervention, emergency housing, treatment, legal assistance, the kind of support that might have made a difference for Miller 30 years ago. Sounds right, Curtis agreed. Are you heading back to town? Not yet. Need to process this. Calloway glanced at his watch. Think I'll take a drive first. That drive led Calloway to Riverside Gas and Go, where it had all begun a year earlier. The station looked much the same, though new owners had repainted the exterior and added a small deli counter inside. Kayla Wilson no longer worked there, having graduated nursing school, and taken a position at the county hospital. Calloway filled his tank, reflecting on the strange circular journey that had brought him back to this spot. One small act of intervention, rippling outward in ways he never could have anticipated, changing lives, saving some, revealing unexpected connections. Inside, he paid for his gas and bought a coffee, nodding politely to the unfamiliar cashier. As he turned to leave, he nearly collided with a woman entering the store. "Excuse me. Oh, Mr. Calloway." It took him a moment to recognize her without the bruise that had marked their first meeting. "Ms. Reeves. Tessa. Good to see you." Tessa looked transformed from the frightened young woman who had appeared at his door that rainy night. Her hair was styled professionally, her clothing neat and practical, scrubs beneath a light jacket. A student ID badge from the county nursing program hung around her neck. "I heard you were back in town," Calloway remarked. "Sheriff Malone mentioned you'd started classes." She nodded, smiling. "Second semester. It's challenging but good. The right kind of hard, if that makes sense." "Perfect sense." He gestured to her scrubs. "Working as well as studying?" "Part-time at the hospital. Patient care technician." Her expression grew more serious. "Actually, that's how I found out about Brendan, about Crusher. I was on shift when they brought him in last week." "Did he recognize you?" "Yes," she said quietly. "It was difficult for both of us, but necessary, I think." Calloway understood completely. "I just came from seeing him myself." Her eyes widened slightly. "You did? That's surprising?" "Life is full of surprises." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Some are better than others." "Have you seen Curtis lately?" she asked, a hint of color touching her cheeks. "I heard he's doing really well with the program you started." "Completed probation 3 months ago, working full-time at Martinez Auto Repair." Calloway studied her reaction carefully. He'd probably appreciate a call from an old friend. Tessa nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "Maybe. It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are." They parted with polite goodbyes, Calloway watching thoughtfully as she entered the store. Another life changed by the events set in motion at this very spot. From a frightened woman trapped in a destructive relationship to a nursing student building an independent future. That evening, Calloway called an emergency meeting of the veterans. Transition Program Steering Committee, Ryan, Keith, Mike, and Dave, to discuss Crusher's donation and the revelation of his military service. "We've been missing an entire population," Ryan observed as they gathered around Calloway's dining room table. "Guys who didn't get honorable discharges, who don't identify as veterans because they feel they failed somehow." "Exactly," Calloway agreed. "Miller's story got me thinking, how many others are out there who served but don't consider themselves real veterans because of how their service ended?" Dave Wilson, the former pararescue medic, nodded thoughtfully. "In the medical community, we're seeing more recognition that bad paper discharges often resulted from untreated PTSD, TBI, or adjustment disorders, things we understand better now than we did during earlier conflicts. So we expand our outreach," Keith suggested. "Make it explicit that all veterans are welcome, regardless of discharge status." Mike Ramirez, who had been quieter than usual, finally spoke up. "This might be controversial, but I think we should establish a memorial fund in Miller's name." The suggestion met with surprised silence. "Hear me out," Mike continued. "Not to honor what he became, but to acknowledge what we're learning from his story. A fund specifically for veterans who've had contact with the criminal justice system to help break that cycle." Calloway considered the idea. "The Brendan Miller Second Chance Fund." Ryan nodded slowly. "Has a certain poetry to it. The guy who tried to kill you ends up funding programs to prevent others from following his path." "Life takes unexpected turns," Calloway observed. "Sometimes even wrong turns can eventually lead somewhere meaningful." 2 weeks later, Brendan Crusher Miller passed away quietly in the hospice wing of Millfield Regional Medical Center. His funeral was sparsely attended. His sister Angela, a few distant relatives, a handful of former associates from his motorcycle club days, and, somewhat surprisingly, Curtis Fleming. Calloway attended as well, standing at a respectful distance during the brief graveside service. As the small gathering dispersed, Angela approached him. "He asked me to give you this afterward," she said, handing him a sealed envelope. "Said you'd understand when the time was right." Inside was a yellowed photograph of a much younger Brendan Miller in desert camouflage uniform, standing beside his unit somewhere in Saudi Arabia in 1991. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Desert Storm. Before everything went wrong." Also in the envelope was a dog-eared VA pamphlet on PTSD treatment from the early 1990s, never completed, and a brief note in shaky handwriting. "Calloway. Found this when clearing my storage unit. Might have changed everything if I'd filled it out back then. Too late for me, but maybe not for others. BM." The simple message reinforced what Calloway had already come to believe, that their paths had crossed not by mere chance, but as part of a larger pattern of connections and responsibilities. That continued to unfold. 2 days after the funeral, Curtis Fleming called with unexpected news. "Remember how you told me Tessa's working at the hospital now?" he began awkwardly. "I ran into her yesterday when I was getting my physical for the new health insurance at the garage." "And?" Calloway prompted. "We talked. For a long time, actually. She's different now. More confident. Said the women's shelter helped her see that what happened with Crusher wasn't her fault." "Smart woman?" Calloway remarked. "Yeah." Curtis sounded both nervous and pleased. "We're having coffee next week. Just as friends, she made that clear. But it's a start. A good start," Calloway agreed. After hanging up, he went to his workshop, where the rocking chair for Emily was nearly complete. As he applied the final coat of varnish, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had transformed so many lives, including his own. 1 year ago, he had been a retired Marine, living a quiet, somewhat isolated existence, his service to others largely in the past. Now, he stood at the center of a growing network of veterans helping veterans, his days filled with purpose and meaningful connection, all because he had stepped forward at a gas station when it would have been easier to look away. The next day, Sheriff Malone called with news that the county commissioners had unanimously approved funding for a permanent veteran service officer position to coordinate between the sheriff's department, the courts, and the VA. "They want you for the job, James," Malone said. "Part-time, flexible hours, decent pay. You'd be helping identify veterans when they first encounter the system, getting them diverted to appropriate services before things escalate." "Sounds like something that might have helped Miller 30 years ago," Calloway observed. "Exactly. The commissioners are calling it the Missing Link Program, finding veterans who've fallen through the cracks before it's too late." Calloway promised to consider the offer, though in truth, his mind was already made up. The position represented everything he had come to believe in over the past year. That service didn't end with discharge, that the Brotherhood of Arms extended beyond uniform or rank or circumstance, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not on distant shores but in gas stations and courtrooms and hospital rooms right here at home. In the workshop, he added a small finishing touch to Emily's rocking chair, a discreet carving on the underside of the seat, invisible unless you knew where to look. For Emily, small actions, big ripples. Love, Dad. 5 years had passed since the confrontation at Riverside Gas and Go. Millfield had changed in subtle but significant ways, as had James Calloway. Now, 68, Calloway had finally accepted some concessions to age. His daily walks were shorter, his woodworking projects smaller, and reading glasses had become a permanent fixture. But his mind remained sharp, his purpose clear. The veterans, transition program had evolved into the Millfield Veterans Resource Center, a permanent fixture downtown with 3 full-time staff members and dozens of volunteers. The Brendan Miller Second Chance Fund had helped over 40 veterans with legal troubles get back on track. On this particular autumn morning, Calloway stood before a small crowd gathered outside the center's newly expanded facility. As he cut the ceremonial ribbon, he caught sight of familiar faces in the audience: Emily and Mark with their 3 children, Sheriff Malone, now approaching retirement, Ryan Spencer, who directed the center's daily operations, and Curtis Fleming, now the head mechanic at Martinez Auto Repair since Lou's semi-retirement. Near the back stood Tessa Reeves Fleming, Curtis's wife of 2 years, cradling their infant daughter. After completing nursing school, she'd taken a high position with the VA hospital's trauma unit, specializing in care for veterans with PTSD. This expansion represents more than just additional square footage, Calloway told the assembled crowd. It represents our community's growing commitment to those who served, regardless of when, where, or how their service ended. The new wing would house specialized services for veterans with less than honorable discharges, inspired by what they'd learned from Crusher's story. A separate section was dedicated to family support services, helping spouses and children understand and cope with the invisible wounds of war. After the ceremony, as volunteers served refreshments and conducted tours, Calloway found a quiet moment with Curtis and Tessa. "Angela sent this," Curtis said, handing Calloway an envelope. "Found it going through the last of Brendan's things." Inside was a faded newspaper clipping from 1991, showing a military unit returning from Desert Storm. No, the background, barely visible but unmistakable, stood a young Brendan Miller alongside an equally young James Calloway. "Were you in the same unit?" Tessa asked, peering at the photo. Calloway shook his head, genuinely surprised. "Different branches entirely, but it looks like we were at the same base during the drawdown. Ships passing in the night." "Small world," Curtis remarked. "Smaller than we realize," Calloway agreed, studying the image of his younger self standing unknowingly near the man whose path would cross him so dramatically decades later. The moment was interrupted by Tyler, now 13, rushing over with excitement. "Grandpa, Mrs. Davidson is here, and she brought her famous apple pie." Martha Davidson, now 80, had become the unofficial grandmother of the Veterans Center, baking for every event and keeping everyone well fed. Her husband's Korean War memorabilia had been donated to the center's small museum section. As Calloway greeted Martha, he reflected on how the simple act of standing up for her at a gas station had set in motion changes that continued to ripple outward, connecting lives in ways he never could have imagined. Later that afternoon, after most guests had departed, Sheriff Malone joined Calloway on a bench outside the center. "Remember when you told me justice and mercy weren't mutually exclusive?" Malone asked. Calloway nodded. "During the Miller situation." "Been thinking about that a lot lately," Malone admitted. "After 30 years in law enforcement, I'm starting to believe you were right all along." "About time," Calloway replied with a slight smile. "The Missing Link program has changed how we handle veterans in the system. Arrests down 40%, recidivism cut in half." Malone shook his head in wonder. "All because you couldn't mind your own business at a gas station, just doing what needed to be done." "That's always been your problem," Malone said, though his tone was affectionate. "Never could walk away from someone in trouble." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Calloway took a solitary walk through downtown. His path led him, perhaps inevitably, to Riverside Gas and Go. The station had changed hands again, now owned by a national chain. Nothing remained of the place where he'd intervened to help Martha Davidson 5 years earlier. Yet as he stood there, memories flowed freely, not just of the confrontation, but of everything that had followed. "Grandpa," Tyler called, jogging to catch up with him. "Mom's looking for you. Dinner's almost ready. Just taking a walk down memory lane, Calloway explained. Tyler glanced at the gas station curiously. Is this where it happened? Where did you stand up to those bikers? It is. Do you ever regret it? Getting involved? The boy's question revealed a maturity beyond his years. Calloway considered his answer carefully. There were moments when they broke into the house, when they came after our family, that I wondered if it had been worth it. But now, seeing everything that's come from it? He shook his head. No regrets. Mom says you can't help yourself. That you always stand up for people, even when it's dangerous. Your mother knows me well, Calloway admitted. But here's something I've learned, Tyler. Standing up for what's right isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about building bridges instead of walls. Sometimes it's about seeing the humanity in people, even when they're at their worst. The boy nodded thoughtfully. Like with Crusher? Mom told me how he turned out to be a veteran too. Exactly. If someone had stood up for him when he came home from war, maybe his story would have ended differently. They walked together toward Emily's house, where the family was gathering for their weekly dinner. As they turned the corner, Tyler asked, "One more question. Would you do it all over again? Knowing everything that would happen?" Calloway placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. In a heartbeat. The next morning, Calloway sat on his porch watching the sunrise, a cup of coffee warming his hands. His phone buzzed with a message from Curtis. Thought you'd want to know. Just got a call from State Correctional. Snake's being released today, program representatives meeting him at the gate. Snake, Eric Peterson, had undergone a transformation of his own during his incarceration, participating in every rehabilitation program available and eventually becoming a peer counselor for other inmates with addiction issues. Upon learning of his impending release, the Veterans Resource Center had immediately offered support services. Another life changed. Another chance at redemption. Calloway's phone buzzed again, this time with a photo from Ryan, the center's main meeting room, already filled with veterans for the morning support group. Among the familiar faces was a new one, a young woman in a Marine Corps t-shirt, looking uncertain but determined. The caption read, "First female combat vet at group. Says she heard about us from some old Marine who helped her grandmother at a gas station years ago." Calloway smiled, recognizing Martha Davidson's granddaughter Sarah, recently returned from deployment overseas. The connections continued to spread, invisible threads linking the community in unexpected ways. As he prepared to head to the center for his weekly mentoring sessions, Calloway paused to straighten the Marine Corps flag that flew beside the American flag in his front yard. His service medals, long stored in drawers, now hung framed in his living room, not out of pride, but as a reminder of the responsibility that came with them, the responsibility to stand up, to reach out, to build bridges. 5 years ago, he had been a retired Marine living a quiet, somewhat isolated life. Now he stood at the center of a community that had transformed itself through the simple recognition that no veteran, no person, should have to face their battles alone. It had all. Started with one moment, one choice, at a gas station on an ordinary evening. Small actions, big ripples. As James Calloway drove toward town, toward the future he had helped create, he felt the weight of his years balanced by the lightness of purpose. The mission continued. It always would, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.